Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lidarga Velazian. Coming up in today's newscast. Gaza war day 95, and the IDF has moved into phase 3 of the war, using lower intensity warfare against remaining Hamas terrorists. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visits the Lebanese border amid increased tensions with Iranian terror proxy Hezbollah. And the star of the popular television series Fauda was seriously injured while fighting in Gaza. His family is asking for prayers for his recovery. Day 95 of the war, and the defense minister and IDF are now saying that the military operation in Gaza has moved into phase 3. The progress toward the elimination of Hamas has now reached the point that Israel can use lower intensity warfare against remaining pockets of resistance. More on this from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
After much success and over 3 months of fighting, the IDF is moving into phase 3 of the war. In phases 1 and 2, control of territory and then neutralizing terrorist infrastructure in northern and much of central Gaza, phase 3 of operations are focused on Hamas leadership holding out in and under Khan Yunis. In interviews with international media, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and the IDF spokesman said that moves into the southern part of the densely populated Palestinian enclave require different tactics in order to avoid civilian casualties. Meanwhile, Israel Hayom newspaper is reporting that the IDF now knows the exact location of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, the ruler of the Gaza Strip and the mastermind of the October 7th terror attacks. According to the report, Sinwar has surrounded himself with a large number of Israeli hostages, preventing the IDF from carrying out a strike on him. IDF operations are intense in southern Gaza, with steady progress being made toward eliminating remaining Hamas strongholds in and under Khan Yunis. Elsewhere in Gaza, the IDF continues to locate and then destroy Hamas infrastructure. Israeli forces located what they said was the largest weapons production site so far found in Gaza, with underground workshops they said were used to produce long-range missiles capable of hitting targets in northern Israel.
We're now entered into an industry factory that created the rockets, the long-range rockets. These are the 100 kilometers rockets that were being built here and then being tunneled down with elevators to a big tunnel that is designed especially for those cages of rockets. We're seeing the detonators of the rockets being done by the CNC machines here.
The materials used were supposed to have been used for the economic development of Gaza.
They are made from iron, they're made from dual systems, dual materials that Israel provide for the Palestinians through the passing. Those materials were meant to go for agriculture, for fertilizer, for agriculture. Those CNC machines were meant to be for housing, for hospitals. The cement was meant to help building houses. Instead, Hamas built the terror systems of tunnels, the rockets as a main industry, and used everything he can.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
And on the northern front, a top Hezbollah commander was killed in a targeted strike attributed to Israel deep inside Lebanese territory. The strike followed a visit to the northern border and fresh warnings to end the provocations or risk war. More from ILTV's William Sharon.
Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the northern border city of Kiryat Shmona, hours after the center of the town was targeted by Hezbollah RPGs, fired from Lebanon. Netanyahu told the IDF reservists that Israel prefers to restore security in the area without going to war with Hezbollah, but that it is ready to do so.
אנחנו נעשה הכל כדי להחזיר את הביטחון לצפון ולאפשר למשפחות שלכם, כי רבים מכם בני המקום, לחזור הביתה בביטחון ולדעת שאי אפשר להתעסק איתנו. אנחנו נעשה כל מה שצריך, ואנחנו גם מעדיפים, כמובן, שהדבר יעשה, זה לא מערכה רחבה, אבל זה כבר עניין שלו. זה לא יעצור אותנו.
A short time later came news from Lebanon of the killing of a senior commander in Hezbollah's elite Radwan force. The commander was Wassam el-Tawil, killed when he and another Hezbollah fighter were targeted in their car about 15 kilometers north of the Israeli border. El-Tawil had a leading role in managing Hezbollah's operation in the south. Defense Minister Gallen painted a graphic picture for Hezbollah if they are not deterred. He told the Wall Street Journal that Israel can copy-paste the Gaza war to Beirut. Alluding to the U.S. de-escalation efforts in Lebanon, Gallen said that Israel isn't afraid to go to war with the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon if push comes to shove.
And joining me now with more on the war over 3 months in is host of ILTV's Weekly Insider, Steve Leibovitz. Steve, always great to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
So look, you've been covering this war. We've all been covering this war for over 3 months now, day in, day out. What's your assessment? Where do we stand today?
I think we're somewhat shell-shocked, not knowing exactly where we're at. The Army is declaring that we are entering phase 3. The government is kind of sounding a different message about we're in it to win it and until they're all defeated. Blinken has just arrived in the country. He wants some answers about what is Israel's plan for Gaza the day after. And there are going to be some very interesting, tough love kind of meetings between the U.S. administration and Israel now.
And what about on the northern front?
The northern front is becoming increasingly frustrating. We had, of course, the film, which I bring up in tonight's Insider, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. If you're going to shoot, shoot, don't talk. We've warned Hezbollah many, many times, too many times. In my opinion, the Army's ready to start shooting in a serious way. We could be on the edge of warfare. On the other hand, diplomacy might somehow...
Trying to reach a diplomatic solution.
Trying to get things to go back to normal. When the Gaza war ends, whenever that is, and the firing stops inside Gaza, Hezbollah will probably cease firing in the north like they did during one of the hostage pauses. But will they move back from the border so that our civilians can feel safe going home to Kiryat Shmona?
That's the million-dollar question. And so, Steve, tell us about this week's Insider. What's the topic? Who are your guests? What will you discuss?
War weary. 93 days in, we're all war weary, and we have to try to focus on where we're going next. Ambassador Jeremy Sakharov, Israeli ambassador to Germany until recently, talks about the diplomatic issues, about Blinken's visit, about where we're going next, what the plan is. And I have Yossi Klein Halevi, who's a brilliant philosopher, author, journalist from the Hartman Institute, a senior fellow at the Hartman Institute. He joins us as well.
So, Steve, last time you were on, we spoke, you said you were optimistic about the future. Do you still feel that way?
What year are we talking about? How far into the future? Look, I was very optimistic. I had a bar mitzvah for one of my grandkids, the third one of the boys. I was very optimistic that we will live together to see his wedding.
Congratulations, and let's hope so. Steve Leibovitz, thank you so much for joining us today. And moving on, the IDF announced the names of 9 soldiers who fell in battle in Gaza on Tuesday morning, bringing the total of fallen since the start of the operation to 185.
Sergeant Roy Tal, a 19-year-old from Kfar Yoshua, a fighter in the 94th Battalion. Major Reservist David Schultz, a 26-year-old from Elazar, a fighter in the Engineering Battalion. Major General Reservist Yakir Hakashter, a 26-year-old from Jerusalem, a fighter in the Engineering Battalion. Major Gabriel Blum, a 27-year-old from Bet Shemesh, a fighter in the divisional engineering team of the 36th Division. 5 soldiers from the Yahalom Unit Combat Engineering Corps were killed. They are Major Amit Moshe Shachal, 25, from Ramat Yochanan; Captain Denis Kochmalov Wexler, 32, from Be'er Sheva; Captain Rona Frimi, 26, from Hod HaSharon; Major Reservist Roy Avram Maimon, 24, from Afula; and Major Akiva Yasinski, 35, from Ramat Gan. The nation was saddened to learn that the star singer and actor Idan Amedi, best known for the popular television series Fauda, was seriously injured while fighting in Gaza. An IDF reservist in the engineering corps, Amedi was one of the first well-known figures to report for duty following October 7th. He is being treated at Tel Aviv Hospital, and his wounds are extremely serious, but not life-threatening. His family is asking the Israeli public to pray for the recovery of Idan ben Tova Amedi. Our prayers as well.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel for his 5th visit since the start of the war. Blinken is attending a meeting of the War Cabinet and briefing Israeli leaders on his talks with Arab partners in the region. We get more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Upon arrival in Israel, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken emphasized the importance that Israel permit displaced Palestinians to return to their homes in northern Gaza. The international community has been urging Israel to de-escalate its offensive against Hamas and pave the way for an end to the war. Israeli leaders are saying that the return home of Gaza civilians will depend on Hamas's willingness to release Israeli hostages held captive since October 7th. That's but one of the thorny issues on the agenda. The U.S. has been pushing for lower intensity warfare, more humanitarian aid, and movement toward plans for Gaza after the war that include Palestinian civilian rule and potentially a role for the Palestinian Authority. Blinken's first stop was a meeting with President Isaac Herzog.
So I want to thank the United States of America, President Biden, and the administration and you, Secretary Blinken, for your moral call of duty, for the fact that you're standing steadfast with Israel in this battle, which has to do clearly with humanity and with the values of the free world.
I've just come from a number of countries in the region, Turkey, Greece, Jordan, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and I want to be able to share some of what I heard from those leaders with the President as well as with the Prime Minister and the Cabinet later today. And of course we'll have an opportunity to sit with the families of some of the hostages and discuss our relentless efforts to bring everyone home and back with their families. And there's lots to talk about, in particular, about the way forward.
Meanwhile, in a U.S. church, President Biden was interrupted by protesters calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Biden said this in unprepared remarks.
I understand their passion, and I've been quietly working with the Israeli government to get them to reduce and significantly get out of Gaza.
And over 130 hostages are still being held in Gaza by Hamas. Their families are growing increasingly worried with their loved ones being held now for more than 3 months.
Over 3 months have passed, and the families of the 133 hostages still being held in Gaza are doubling up their efforts to ensure bringing back their loved ones remains a top international priority. In recent days, hostage families travelled to Qatar, where they called on leaders to step up mediation efforts for another hostage exchange. And until the hostages are returned, they are pushing for humanitarian assistance for the captives.
Today, after almost 100 days, the gap between the sides is still large. They believe the Qataris that some sort of temporary pause in the fighting will expedite the negotiations that will enable to bring hostages back home alive. We also expect them to pursue humanitarian aid to the hostages, including providing medical attention and doctors visiting the hostages and providing medical aid.
There is also a deep sense of despair among the families that people outside of Israel are losing interest in their plight.
And over the last 3 months, we have seen a decline in interest, especially in terms of media. Right now, people want to speak to hostages that were released. They're less interested in the families of those who still have family members that are in Gaza.
But the families are not giving up and are calling on the world to increase pressure on Hamas to release all the hostages.
He and the other hostages, they are all running out of time. And I know in my heart that he is alive. And we need your help and connection to spread the word about the hostages and their stories, and to put as much as international pressure on Hamas so they will release the hostages, or at least right now let the Red Cross go in and treat our hostages. And we need your help to bring them all home now.
95 days in captivity and no end yet in sight.
Please, don't turn your back on my sister and on another 135 that needs the world help. Don't look aside. They need to come back home.
Should bring them back home now. And moving on, U.S. Congresswoman Rashida T was awarded the title of the 2023 Anti-Semite of the Year. The award is given out annually by Stop Anti-Semitism, a nonpartisan U.S.-based organization that fights and exposes anti-Semitism. Tlaib beat out supermodel Gigi Hadid and the political leader of Hamas himself, Ismail Haniyeh, which shows just how severely Americans view Tlaib's anti-Semitic rhetoric. Last year, Kanye West received the so-called honor. Tlaib received the award after 15,000 people cast their votes. Stop Anti-Semitism executive director said that the congresswoman has a long history of anti-Semitism, but her statements in the wake of the October 7th attack, blaming Israel for Hamas's massacre and defending calls for the genocide of Jews, are what earned her this year's title. And now joining us today in the studio is Micah Leen, an Israeli businessman, attorney, and activist. He serves as the chairman of Voices of Israel, a public-private partnership aimed at combating anti-Israel sentiment. In October 2015, Micah's father, Richard Leen, was murdered by Hamas terrorists in an attack on bus number 78 in Jerusalem. After his father was murdered, Micah wrote an op-ed in the New York Times entitled "The Facebook Intifada," which was one of the first times the role of social media in the spread of terror was brought to light. Since then, he's led a successful campaign to get Hamas and Hezbollah removed from mainstream social media. Micah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Lida.
So can you tell us a little bit about the terrorist attack that murdered your father and about your experiences?
Sure. So my father was a kind, gentle person, a retired elementary school principal. He was on a bus riding home from a doctor's appointment one day in Jerusalem, and two Hamas terrorists boarded the bus and shot him and stabbed him brutally. He was in intensive care, unconscious for 10 days. I sat by his side that entire time, and the day after he was attacked, Hamas put out a reenactment video where they showed how the attack took place, and it was an instructional video to teach children, little kids, how to go out and do similar attacks. And that video went completely viral, and it was seen tens of millions of times around the world on Facebook and on YouTube. And during the time I was sitting next to my father's bed as he was dying, I started studying this, and I saw that terror had just run rampant on social media. Hamas, Hezbollah were inciting people, they were recruiting people, they were raising money. It was all over the place, and nobody was talking about it. And I had this burning energy to do something about it, and I decided to try to create a pressure storm to stop it. I started writing op-ed pieces in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, many other places. I appeared on television in the United States on almost every channel. I helped initiate lawsuits. I helped produce movies, spoke at universities, Harvard, Yale. And it brought the issue to light. Many other people started talking about it, and there was so much pressure placed on Facebook and YouTube that they eventually retained executive-level vice presidents and put policies in place, retained thousands of people to monitor social media to remove terror. And within 2 years, you could no longer find Hamas or Hezbollah or ISIS on mainstream social media. So I saw that we were able to have an impact on that. It was something that I did personally together with lots of pro-Israel organizations. Governments didn't really take part in this. And so it sort of ended there. And then I kind of went back to my day job.
And so, I want to fast forward to October 7th, 2023. What role has social media played in this war? I mean, it seems as though Israel is really losing on the social media front. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
Sure. So we're losing in a big way. And the first thing you need to do if you want to deal with a problem is say it out loud. We're losing in a big way. We're getting creamed. If you look at the numbers on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, it doesn't matter where, the anti-Israel rhetoric and the supporters of our enemies are just running rampant, and they're outnumbering us 10 to 1, 100 to 1. It depends where you're looking. And so you have to ask, how does that happen? Why are they able to do that? And there's a few reasons that happen. First off, they put a lot of planning into it. They understood that information can be used in warfare, and so they weaponized social media, something that here in Israel we did not understand on a government level, on a military level. So they put a lot of planning into it, they put a lot of money into it, and they've taken advantage of a couple things that social media allows. One is fake news, that you can say anything you want. So you can just say, Gaza is an open-air prison, Israel is doing genocide, and you can repeat that 1,000,000 times. That's the first thing. Second thing that social media allows is to create an echo chamber. So if you see somebody's bought into that, you can start to pump them with that, and you can say it 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways, and it becomes a reality for them. The third thing is technology, it's bots. You can basically create fictitious accounts to impact the algorithms on social media, and our enemies have spent lots of time and money preparing for this moment. So on October 7th, immediately after this started happening, social media went wild, and it didn't go wild just because of the event. It went wild because there were bots in place and ready to start attacking us and start putting out this anti-Israel propaganda.
So essentially a war on another front. And how do we change this trajectory? I mean, how can Israel win this information war, this social media war?
Okay, so we have to change it, first of all, because we need international support, we need American support to back us up in our war against terror and jihadists. So after we recognize the problem, we need to recognize that it's a war, and that it's not social media as we understand it at home. I'll just make a video and share it with my friends, and that will have some influence. It's war, so we need to treat it as such. And that means combating our enemies in warlike manners. It may mean influencing algorithms within social media companies, actually attacking our enemies and social media companies to shift these things. Because the fact that TikTok promotes Palestinian rhetoric 100 times more than Israeli is an actual attack on our sovereignty as a country, and we have to fight back. So we need to fight back on a technology level, and we have the ability to do it, but it requires a government to prioritize that. Also, lots of money needs to be spent doing this. There's just no way around it. To counter all this stuff, you need massive, massive investment in distribution of content, creative content, and actual technology, which is not being spent. And finally, I think there's the issue of regulation. So I talked about this for years, that we need to regulate social media. In America, it really started to gain ground. Donald Trump, right before he lost the election, started talking about changing Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which is basically the blanket protection that social media companies get. He didn't make that happen. Joe Biden, after he was elected, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times suggesting the same change. The social media has become so strong in America, and their lobby so powerful that they didn't allow that to happen yet. But basically, it will need to be regulated if we want to ever stop this.
Micah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around the country tonight, with lows averaging around 11 degrees Celsius or 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see rainy showers alongside steady top temperatures, seeing highs of about 19 degrees Celsius or 67 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Lidarga Velazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.